Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. It is truly an honor to welcome you to Doing Dynamic Digital Inclusion Locally at WSIS+20, a side event taking place here at the CUNY Graduate Center during the United Nations high-level meeting reviewing 20 years of the World Summit on the Information Society. Thank you all for being here. My name is Loida Garcia Fibo. I am I'm a member of the IFLA Governing Board and chair of the Management of Library Association section. And for this occasion, I'm also going to mention that I am the chair of the American Library Association United Nations Subcommittee. And we are delighted that you are all here. Being here in person and making this space for conversation is very important for for the libraries at global level. And I would like to begin by expressing sincere gratitude to the organizations whose leadership and collaboration make this event possible. As I mentioned, American Library Association, but we are really extremely happy to collaborate with the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions that is really moving this event. With UNESCO's Information for All program, the Universal Postal Union, and of course, the New York City Library leadership present here too. This gathering matters because WSIS+20 is not just a review. It's a reset. It's a moment where the international community assesses progress on digital access, information equity, and the integration of information and communication technologies into sustainable development. The outcomes of this process will shape policies that directly influence how libraries and other trusted community institutions serve their communities in the digital age. And for libraries, this moment is critical. Across the world, libraries serve as anchors of trust. They provide public access, digital literacy support, safe spaces for learning, and human guidance at moments when technology feels overwhelming, exclusionary. They reach people whom market-based solutions often overlook, and they do so with dignity, equity, and care. And so today we are going to explore various matters, and we are delighted to have experts with us from the library field, and as I mentioned, from UNESCO and the Universal Postal Union. And I would like to share the names of the speakers with you. And we have them, some of them are online and some of them are here in person. We have Mr. Guilherme Canela de Souza Godoy, Director of Digital Inclusion, Policy and Transformation, and the IFAP Secretary of UNESCO. Mr. Kevin Hernandez, Digital Inclusion Expert, Universal Postal Union. Dr. Anthony Chow, here with us, Director of the San Jose State University iSchool. Diana Price, also here with us, Central Library Manager, Alexandria Public Library. And Damilare Oyedele, CEO and co-founder, Library Aid Africa. So we have the librarians are in the room and our esteemed collaborators are online. And we're going to then now move to the program. And we'd like to invite, before moving with the program, we'd like to invite a special guest that we have today with us, is the president-elect of the American Library Association, and she has some welcoming remarks for us as well. Maria Macaulay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's so good to see all of you and to be here today. Thank you, Loida. I believe that Eleanor Roosevelt, late grandmother of the chair of the Cambridge Public Library, my home institution, Jim Roosevelt, would be proud to know that access to the internet is a recognized human right by the United Nations, and also proud of her grandson, who has been a champion of libraries, serving as a library trustee in Cambridge for over 30 years. I know that, like all of us who are here today and the institutions we represent, Jim Roosevelt believes deeply in the principles of digital inclusion. Libraries are key drivers in equitable access to broadband and other technologies and life-changing institutions that are building digital skills and creating a more literate, inclusive, and sustainable society. At the Cambridge Public Library, we see these digital equity resources in action every day. And we see how they are helping people find jobs, seek healthcare, connect with family, and so much more. In a recent one-on-one tech help session, a first-generation college student gained a free refurbished laptop, a hotspot, a LinkedIn Learning access, and learned a lot about one-on-one tech help. Now he is pursuing his dream of launching a tech empowerment and social justice small business to uplift his community. This collaboration turned the digital divide into a community-driven bridge, providing technology access and skills that create conditions for self-empowerment, economic mobility, entrepreneurship, and digital inclusion. And in Cambridge, we have a digital navigator program like so many of you. And we do this in partnership, creative partnership with many people in the community, including our community television, our healthcare providers, our schools, human services, and our very important low-income housing providers. Policy research for our work, and I know we're connecting this with policy research, has included Cambridge's digital equity planning, including a 2025 study with recommendations. I am eager to learn from our speakers today on successful local digital inclusion infrastructures, creative partnerships that foster digital inclusion, and how we may integrate local efforts into global agendas to help close the gap of 2.6 billion people still digitally unconnected, especially marginalized community members. Thank you to Loida Garcia-Febo and Stephen Weiber for the invitation to say some remarks today, and to the organizing bodies IFLA, UNESCO, and ALA, United Nations.
Thank you so much, Maria. Maria is here all the way from Boston, so we really appreciate the support of the library leadership in New York City, nationally and internationally. And now I would like to welcome our first speaker, Mr. Guilherme Canela de Souza Godoy. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Greetings from Paris. From here is already good evening. I wish I was there with you, although I heard it's very cold, so maybe in Paris is blue skies today and 14 degrees Celsius, so I guess it's a bit more cozy. But in any case, it would have been a pleasure to be there physically with you. Let me start by first thanking IFLA and the American Library Association UN area for co-organizing this. I'm very, very glad that we have under the chapeau of the WSIS+20 review process this dedicated discussion on the role of libraries for the space of the information and knowledge societies. But I'm particularly happy with the decision of concentrating this event on how we can further stimulate that locally. Yeah, I remember when we had these discussions back then in the 2003, when the WSIS process started formally in Geneva and later in Tunis in 2005. And even more vividly, when with IFLA, for example, we were all celebrating the inclusion of the SDG 16 in the overall 2030 agenda, so the role of access to information for governance. that we were in a different moment compared where we were today. Those moments were moments where the multilateralism and the multi-stakeholderism, which are two important concepts for us to keep advancing the overall agenda of digital inclusion, more specifically, and the protection and promotion of the free flow of information and human rights more broadly. So back then, those two ideas, the multilateralism and multi-stakeholderism, were thriving. They were still a huge hope for all of us. Today, we must acknowledge that we are living on a much more challenging moment, where, for example, those two key concepts, the multilateralism and the multi-stakeholderism, are under attack. And we need more than ever to make sure that all the relevant stakeholders, from the international organizations, for example, that are co-organizing this meeting, to every individual in every community, to understand the importance of this collective action for getting there, for at the end of the day, including everyone digitally, not leaving there behind, and including them meaningfully. So the master of ceremony, or the moderator, sorry, when she introduced the conversation, or the next speaker, they were already mentioned that we still have 2.6 billion unconnected, which is per se a huge problem. But even when we look to the connected ones, we have still bigger problems in those with those that are connected, and because they are not meaningfully connected on average. So we have problems of how many can actually be connected in their own languages. Consider the 7,000 languages that we have in this planet, plus who actually can use their content, absorb their content in their own languages, who that actually have access to different sorts of capacity building processes, etc., to use these meaningfully with all the relevant skills, media and information literacy skills, AI skills, and so on and so forth. And then when we look into the disparities of those connections, those disconnections, they are higher among women and girls. They are higher among indigenous communities. They are higher among people with disabilities, and I could keep going. So not only we are facing, as I was saying, a very challenging moment to key concepts in this agenda, we were not still able to deliver key and central elements of the promises of WSIS and SDGs and so on. And we are just in the last mile, for example, to reach to 2030. So an event like this, it's essential because we need actually to look in those key drivers and to understand what are the central efforts that every one of us and our organizations should put in place to try to revert this bad trend, for example, against multilateralism and multi-stakeholderism, but also what else we need to do to not only reach the gaps of the unconnected, but also to increase that those that are connected can do that in a meaningful way. So in that sense, of course, I don't need to repeat to this audience here that libraries are a particularly relevant player in this process, and particularly relevant when we are talking about the ownership of all communities everywhere in the world. With the 2.8 million libraries distributed globally, you are one of the most incredible networks for doing that. And in a moment that we are trying to see as WSIS in the next stages, and very much connected with the implementation of the Global Digital Compact. I must say that I was introduced as an expert on this conversation. I'm far from that. I'm the director here, as was mentioned, but I have no comparison with one of my predecessors Miriam Nisbet, that actually was an expert in the area of libraries, my dear friend Miriam. But what I can help from my point of view is how I can be a facilitator, and all of us in the UNESCO Secretariat, in connecting the dots between the decisions that are taken by our member states at the level of the global discussions, and how this can trickle down, as is the discussion of this panel, to the local level. So this is some of the elements that I'm going to concentrate very briefly now before concluding. So there are many drivers in understanding what are the challenges for connecting people in a meaningful way. For UNESCO, a few of them are particularly relevant. As I mentioned before, one is multilingualism. So UNESCO was kind of pioneer even before the WSIS process. Our General Conference, as many of you know, approved in 2003 a global recommendation for promoting multilingualism in the cyberspace. And this has evolved in many ways. We just launched a couple of weeks ago in the World Social Summit in Doha a new global roadmap for promoting multilingualism in the digital era, already addressing the challenges of AI. And this was a process built listening the communities all over the world. This is very much connected with the decade of indigenous languages that UNESCO also has the Secretariat on behalf of the United Nations system, and goes all the way to 2032. So just to say that here, and particularly in the AI era, it's very, very crucial that we don't lose the perspective of keeping the promotion of multilingualism with all the different challenges and formats here. So a second driver is the open solutions story. Here, I'm talking about open education resources, about open science, about open software, and so on. So here, another area that UNESCO has invested a lot and is particularly relevant for understanding the idea of meaningful connectivity. And for measuring this is also another important aspect. UNESCO is very much interested in how we measure that. So that's why we have been promoting for many years now the Internet Universality Indicators, trying to look into the landscape of the Internet based on four essential elements. This should be based on human rights, this should be open, this should be accessible, and this should be also having a multi-stakeholder logic. So in that sense, the Information for All program is very much looking into these lines of action, in looking information as a development process, looking into information ethics, in information preservation, in information literacy, and also in multilingualism, to make sure that all those different drivers are present there. Couple of topics to conclude. Under this umbrella, our collaboration and cooperation with IFLA is particularly relevant. I won't enter into all the details, but the Information for All program has been, the member states of UNESCO have been consistently endorsing this logic, first with the UNESCO the IFLA UNESCO Public Library Manifesto, more recently with IFLA UNESCO School Library Manifesto, and this endorsement by member states could be seen as another paper in the drawer, but it's very important that we understand these as accountability mechanisms, that every library in the world or every stakeholder interested on this can actually go to their government and say, look, your diplomats have endorsed these things, so now let's walk the talk. Right? And this is also part of the different dynamic coalitions that we have been promoting as Information for All program, and that IFLA is part of this. And then I want to conclude by mentioning the most recent thing that we are also launching in a way during this conversation that we are having in this meeting in New York. That is a new issue brief that we have produced with IFLA about the global network of libraries and local impact, a policy roadmap to build an inclusive digital future. And this document is looking into several of these elements that I had already mentioned the meaningful access, the digital literacy, the multi-stakeholder participation, trust and safety, preservation and information, AI, and emerging technologies. And this document, I won't enter into details. You can all access it in the IFLA website and in the UNESCO website. Offers 56 tailored recommendations to different actors, the governments, the library partners, the civil society organizations, and also is looking into two case studies from local communities in South Africa and in Tunisia. So I do hope that these drivers can be a call for us to act in these very challenging times, and we can only do this together. It's a collective, huge challenge in front of us that needs really to connect the global, the regional, and the local. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you very much for this very insightful intervention. And once again, for everyone who will probably tune in to the recording of this event, this is the document our speaker mentioned is the Global Network of Libraries and Local Impact, a policy roadmap to build an inclusive digital future, and is from UNESCO IFAP Information for All issue brief series. Thank you so much. And now we welcome our next speaker is Mr. Kevin Hernandez from Universal Postal Union.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So greetings, everyone from Switzerland. Sorry I could not join you in person this time. I actually wish I could. I'm originally from New York, so it's a pity that I could not be there with you today. So as was mentioned, my name is Kevin Hernandez, and I am a digital inclusion expert at the Universal Postal Union. For those of you who do not know, the Universal Postal Union is the United Nations specialized agency focusing on the postal sector. It's one of the lesser known United Nations agencies, but we are a UN organization. And today I will be presenting on how post offices contribute to digital inclusion, including findings from a recent report that we recently published, which I invite you all to have a look at after this presentation. It's titled The Postal Sector's Role in the Digital Economy and Digital Society, and you can find it on our website. So as you all know, and as was just mentioned by Guillermo, about 2.6 billion people are completely offline, and even those who are connected are not, many of those who are not connected are not connected in a meaningful way, with marginalized groups less likely to be meaningfully connected. Meanwhile, at the same time, all sectors of the economy and society are undergoing a process of digitalization. People are increasingly expected to use technology to access government services, to buy and sell goods and services, to perform transactions, and even to apply for jobs and work and study remotely. So in other words, the ability to participate in society and in the economy is increasingly mediated by digital technology. And this leaves those who are not meaningfully connected at risks of being left behind as a result. And to ensure that less meaningfully connected people are not excluded by digitalization, many governments and service providers have embraced what we call a multi-channel service delivery approach, which is now considered a best practice. And what this means is providing multiple ways to access the same service, including fully digital channels like websites and apps, along with digitally enabled in-person channels that allow people to do things face to face. And the reports on the right-hand side of this slide are just some of the recent high-level reports which emphasize this necessity. And this approach acknowledges that the digital divide exists and that human touchpoints are essential to ensure that less connected groups can continue to access services that have been digitalized. And along with promoting inclusion, this approach allows everybody to access services according to their own preference. It doesn't force people to have to do things digitally. So as part of a multi-channel approach, many governments and service providers have introduced what we call one-stop shop service centers. And these are physical places where citizens can access a wide range of digitally enabled services under the same roof with face-to-face support, allowing less connected people to visit them and to access the same services that are available online. However, setting up networks of these service centers can be very expensive and challenging to do in an extensive or fully inclusive way, especially when it requires constructing new buildings and hiring staff and fostering trust with communities, which is something that libraries also enjoy. As a recent FAO report found, service centers tend to be too few in number and are often concentrated in urban areas, meaning that they are not easily accessible for rural populations who have to travel long distances and often end up spending a significant amount of time and money to access the same services that are easily accessible online or to people in urban areas. Meanwhile, existing infrastructure like posts and also libraries are very well positioned to contribute to more extensive networks of these one-stop shops. And by transforming this existing infrastructure into hubs for essential digital services. So in the case of post offices specifically, there are over 650,000 post offices globally. And the unique thing about this infrastructure is that a majority of them are actually in rural areas, which is specifically the places where people are less likely to be online or to be meaningfully connected. And this is especially true in developing regions, as you can see on this graph. So posts already have this kind of retail service presence in places where people have less access to technology. And this reach is thanks in large part to the sector's universal service obligation. So all 192 UPU member states must designate a postal operator who is legally mandated to provide at least the most basic postal services to all residents within their territory. And this obligation incentivizes post offices across the world to open and delivery staff to visit places where other organizations tend to stay away from. And I think one very important thing to highlight, especially for this crowd, since you're all based in the US, and a place where the post mainly does letters and parcels, is that in many countries, actually in most countries, the post does much more than just send letters and packages. Actually, post offices are the second largest contributor to financial inclusion in the world. Globally, over 1 billion people have a bank account that they can access at a post office. And posts have been shown to be especially effective at financially including groups that tend to have less access to bank accounts elsewhere, including women and rural communities. So posts, once again, have a very extensive retail service network. And this extensive retail service presence means that much of the needed infrastructure to provide digital services in person is already in place. So not just the buildings and the staff and the community trust, but also service counters and payment systems for transactions, and even delivery staff that can offer digital services at the customers' homes. And this presents a very significant opportunity to extend the reach of essential digital services in a cost-effective way while helping achieve the policy objectives of national governments, including things like bridging the digital divide and leaving no one behind. So our report found evidence that many posts are already turning this vision into a reality. So our report was informed by a survey of posts from over 150 countries, and we found that a majority are already contributing to digital inclusion through the digital services that they offer. So we found that 71% of posts are offering e-commerce services and are thus promoting digital and economic inclusion. 58% are offering digital financial services and are thus promoting digital and financial inclusion. 51% are offering e-government services, which really surprised us, and thus promoting digital and social inclusion. And 70% are providing at least one digital connectivity service or solution and are thus directly contributing to bridging the digital divide. However, I think it's important to note that digging a bit deeper, it's not just which services posts offer that promotes this inclusion, but also how they offer them. So we found evidence that posts are contributing to multi-channel service delivery. Posts are most likely to offer digital services in person with the support of staff at digitally enabled post office counters. So for example, as you can see from the slide on this graph, the graph on the slide, sorry, the majority of posts offering e-government services do so in person through the post office counter. And I couldn't fit them all on this slide, but we find that this is also true for the other digital service types. And this makes sense because in many situations, These services don't actually fully belong to the posts. Instead, the posts are acting as partners that provide human touch points for the digital services of governments and other digital service providers. So, in other words, posts offer digital services with a human touch and are playing a role as inclusion and market reach enablers for governments and digital service providers around the world. And I will now go on to some examples of what this looks like in practice. So, a great example is from India Post, who recently connected all of their over 164,000 post offices. So India is the country with the most post offices, and all of them are connected to the internet. And they also launched a postal bank to offer digital financial services. And they were able to reach over 100 million accounts in less than 6 years, thanks to the post offices being located in areas where commercial banks are absent. So as you can see, about 90% of the post offices are in rural areas. And a majority of their account holders are women and come from rural areas. And one of the reasons they were so effective at including these groups is thanks to their multi-channel approach. So all of their digital financial services are available on the same mobile app, but they are also available at digitally enabled post office counters with assisted hand-holding support face-to-face. And delivery staff equipped with mobile devices also offer these services at the customer's doorstep. And this provides citizens with multiple ways to access a wide range of digital financial services, and it ultimately promotes financial inclusion in India. And going a step further, India Post also recently launched what they call post office export centers that help Indian MSMEs participate in international e-commerce. And this also uses a multi-channel approach, helping less connected MSMEs do things face to face and helping them participate in the global digital economy. And India Post also contributes to the inclusivity of India's Aadhaar digital ID, which is a very famous digital ID that many of you have probably heard of, by hosting enrollment centers in post offices where less connected people can register and update their information in person. And this feeds into the government's multi-channel approach because many of these processes can also be done online. And then to illustrate that this is also a thing that gets done in high income countries. So in Italy, the Post partnered with the government to digitally upgrade post offices in 7,000 rural villages and transforming them into one-stop shops for e-government services. And this helps the government reach rural and elderly residents in person who might otherwise be excluded. And as you can see from the image on the slide, which actually comes directly from their website, the project also uses a multi-channel approach to deliver these services. And as I mentioned earlier, along with promoting digital inclusion through the provision of inclusive digital services, many posts are also directly contributing to bridging the digital divide. A very good example is from Zimbabwe, where ZimPost has transformed all of its over 200 post offices into what they call digital centers, and over 70% are located in rural areas. And here people can access the internet and digital devices and like PCs. And they can also receive digital skills training, which is actually done in partnership with a local library association. So this is a very good example of collaboration between posts and libraries to where the sum is a bit larger than its parts. And also, visitors can also get assistance accessing digital government services at the post office. And they're also offering digital financial services in partnership with a financial institution and even telemedicine services in partnership with a local startup where people can do things like remote diagnostics and remote screening. And even they're delivering medicine with drones, as you can see here. And there are many other examples that we don't have the time to cover in detail. So in Egypt, post offices are offering 27 digital government services, and they're also offering digital financial services. In Uruguay, post offices provide over 100 essential digital services, including e-government and financial services. Post offices in Zambia have been transformed into one-stop shops for e-government and digital financial services. In Kenya, the post co-locates many of the government's one-stop shop Huduma centers, which are a service center. And in the Czech Republic and also in France, the post also hosts some of the government's one-stop shop service centers, and these are particularly leveraged in rural areas once again. And there are many more examples that are featured in the report, and I invite you all to read it if you would like more information and more case studies. Um, but as these examples illustrate, leveraging posts to offer digital services enables a sort of triple win opportunity for posts, for citizens, and for service providers, including governments. So governments are able to reach marginalized communities, especially in rural areas, while also reducing the costs related to establishing new infrastructure. And this also applies to libraries. And citizens benefit from greater convenience, inclusion, and choice. And they also save time and money by being able to access services closer to home, while posts benefit from reducing their dependence on mail. However, several challenges limit posts from fully contributing to digital inclusion. So, firstly, posts are less likely to offer digital services in developing countries, specifically the places where this approach can have the most impact. Secondly, too many post offices, an estimated 100,000 or nearly 1 in 6 are not connected. And once again, post offices in developing countries, specifically in least developed countries and in rural areas, are the least likely to be connected, meaning they cannot be leveraged to offer digital services. And one challenge that is especially worth emphasizing to this group is that, like libraries, the postal sector's contribution to digital inclusion is currently being overlooked. So, for example, although the GDC, the Global Digital Compact, includes explicit calls to connect schools and hospitals, post offices, like libraries, are not currently mentioned. And posts are also not being mentioned in high-level guidance reports on how to tackle digital divides or how to promote digital inclusion, despite their immense potential and their cost effectiveness. And lastly, our report found that the biggest challenge that posts cite in introducing new digital services is a lack of investment resources. So we need to work on mobilizing resources. So how then do we put ourselves in a better position to better take advantage of the post current potential contribution to the digital economy and society? So first and foremost, governments need to embrace a multi-channel approach to help ensure that nobody is left behind as services are digitalized. And explicitly, they need to integrate posts into these efforts and into their national digital transformation strategies more broadly, along with libraries. And governments must also prioritize the connectivity of post offices for this to work. And enabling policies and regulations are also needed to enable posts to offer a wider range of digital services. And governments, especially regulators, should facilitate access to universal service and access funds to connect key existing infrastructure like libraries and post offices. And we also call on international development actors to recognize this opportunity to leverage the postal network for digital inclusion. And we already see this happening to some extent, but we would like to see this opportunity more widely recognized and leveraged at a more strategic level, which will require working with governments. And it's also important to invest in postal staff training. And we would like to enable global cooperation among all relevant stakeholders. And I would like to end this presentation by highlighting that the UPU's flagship Connect.Post project directly works on making this vision of more of a reality in more places. So we aim to connect every post office in the world to the internet and transform as many of them as possible into digital hubs or one-stop shops for digital services. And at the moment, we would like to thank the Japanese Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications for their generous support, including for connectivity projects that we are currently implementing in 10 countries, with many more likely to follow. And we call on others to partner with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We are learning so many good things. I mean, libraries are partnering with different institutions, private, public agencies all over the world. And this is a beautiful example. I'm coming from Library Association, so I was really looking into the example from Zimbabwe, right? Digital literacy at the post offices with the local library association. This is just so beautiful, and I'm so glad that it can happen. Each one of our first two speakers from UNESCO and the Universal Postal Union offer insights into how digital inclusion becomes real when supported by human touch points, cross-sector partnerships, so important, and policy frameworks that recognize the essential role of community institutions. And now we're going to welcome the librarians to the conversation. And I would like to invite our colleague from Nigeria, Damilare Oyedele, CEO and co-founder of Library Aid Africa, to go first. I understand he has a PowerPoint presentation, so we're going to do that one first. Welcome, Damilare.
Thank you so much. Okay, can you hear me? Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Damilare Oyedele. I work with Library Aid Africa. We leverage digital technology and community engagement approaches to transform libraries into vibrant spaces. So we do this in 4 major approaches: capacity development for librarians, library tech solution, library policy advisory, and library programming and support for libraries. Over the past 6 years of our work, we work with library partners across non-African countries with the impact of our work across 22 African countries. So today, I'll be speaking about lessons from the library, what we need to integrate wider digital inclusion strategies. I will be sharing you stories of libraries and librarians from Nigeria to South Africa, to Namibia, also to Ghana. Also speaking about librarians from Sierra Leone, where they're working with us to transform libraries to digital inclusion ecosystem for all. So what do we need to do to engage libraries further for digital inclusion strategies in African countries? One of the major lessons we've learned over time through our work is to empower librarians to lead digital inclusion efforts. And how will we be doing this over time? We launched the Library Internet Governance Ambassadors Program with the core focus to integrate libraries into the discourse and actions of the IGF. And we've seen librarians across African countries being part of this program, leading efforts on the ground. And some of the effort they lead on the ground encompasses from working on cyber zone projects in the local libraries to empower older people on how to stay safe online. This is learning from South Africa. We also have one of the participants from Nigeria where she's engaging librarians to train them on how to use basic text tools to transform library experiences in the libraries. Also, another person from Nigeria is called Sylvester, where he's empowering young children in secondary schools on how to stay safe online. These are some of the innovative ideas we see them implement in the various countries. Also, more recently, we commenced the Librarians in Tech project, where we are mobilizing librarians across African countries to lead sessions on the need for library tech skills in libraries, with the goal also to empower them. As we progress on from empowering librarians in various African countries, we've also seen some of the video evidences from librarians in tech, this from Sierra Leone, this from Malawi recently. Aside building capacity of librarians, another lesson we have seen, which we are currently working on with evidence of impact of our work, is the need for us to build with our communities. As libraries, we do not operate in silos. We operate in various communities, okay? And through this, we launched the Young African Library Leaders Fellowship, where we are using basic tech tools to empower librarians across African countries to lead change for libraries in their various communities and build with their communities. Over the past 4 cohorts, we have trained 100 young library leaders across 19 African countries that are currently implementing over 50 capstone projects. I'm going to play a short video from one of the participants of the program who is sharing his story about his participation in the program thus far.
Hello, my name is Paul Mensah Amano. I am a social impact leader based in Accra, Ghana, and I run a program called Libraries Without Walls. In 2022, I had a unique opportunity to participate in the Library Aid Africa Young African Library Leaders Fellowship. Through the fellowship, I was able to connect with hundreds of other young Africans from across the continent as we learned the basic principles of library management and took courses that shaped our journey. I'm happy to announce that I've been able to apply all the ideas, all the thought leadership programs and everything I've learned through this project in Ghana, which has helped us to scale our digital literacy project to over 7,000 children since 2022.
The full stories we have of librarians we've trained across the continent leading projects in their various countries. As we work to build with our communities to empower librarians to do that, we've also seen a major part of our work, which is to explore collaboration between libraries. And now we're doing this with libraries across African countries. Early this year, we launched what we called Libraries for Digital Futures. And the focus of this is that we're building a community of libraries across African countries that want to transform the library experiences into a tech hub. And throughout this engagement, we've seen that a lot of libraries want innovative ideas to be run in their libraries, but they need the networks and the contact and the space to do that. And through this particular program, we are linking these libraries to this ecosystem to be able to scale their work and reach more larger audience as they progress. More so, the fourth lesson I want to share with us today is more around how do we now strengthen library systems in our various communities through policies, regulations, and framework that will enable libraries to thrive. A couple of things we've done is in our work on the Library Policy Fellowship, where we are working currently with the Zambia Library Services, where we've launched the first cohort of the program. Over the past couple of months, we'll be providing the Zambia Library Service technical support to the National Library Policy, to which 2 months ago, the National Library Policy for Zambia was approved by the Parliament. And now, currently, we're working with them to translate the policy that's been approved into implementing frameworks to drive progress for libraries in Zambia. This shows how we are working with libraries in various countries to strengthen their systems. Aside this also, progressively, is that we've seen participants from our programs being part of national library systems in various countries. For instance, in Sierra Leone, one of the participants of our program called Dynasty has been appointed as Deputy Chief Librarian of Sierra Leone Library Board. And also in Namibia, one of them also appointed the Deputy President of the Library Association in Namibia. And this is showing how we empower librarians to be able to contribute and build stronger library systems in their various countries. So, what do we need actually as libraries to integrate ourselves to digital inclusion strategies globally? It's very simple, which is we need to empower librarians to build with the communities, collaborate with library institutions, and strengthen library system. Today, I've shared these stories from Ghana to Namibia to South Africa to Lusaka, Zambia, and to Freetown in Sierra Leone, where nothing is actually free. But the goal is to make sure that how do we see libraries differently? How do we show the result of our work and show the evidence of the impact that we are making? Over the past couple of years of our journey, we've been supported heavily by a couple of partners, supporting our work, being part of our journey. And also, we are also inviting you also to be part of this particular progress. An African proverb says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. So you are also invited to be part of our journey by scanning the QR code. To join our story, be part of our system as we empower librarians across African countries to build with their communities, to collaborate with library institutions and strengthen library systems into wider digital inclusion strategies. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Damilare. It's very, very inspiring. And all these stories, I'm thinking, since we are in the USA at this time, that all these very inspiring stories can be very useful for our local librarians as well. We can use these global examples to impact our local areas, our cities, our towns, our states. And I hope they are inspiring to those that will access the recording or the materials at a later time. I will now like to welcome Dr. Anthony Chow from the San Jose State University High School.
Thank you very much, Loida. I also want to thank IFLA, ALA, UNESCO, and the UN for this opportunity to participate in this important conversation. My name is Dr. Anthony Chow, and I wear many hats today. Member of the ALA UN SCG Subcommittee, President of the California Library Association, Professor and Director of the School of Information at San Jose State, and also as Vice Chair of the Board of Little Free Library. I do need to say no more often, right? My core theme, libraries are local community hubs for all types of information and literacy, especially digital literacy and inclusion. And they are high on return on investment, at the very least 2 to 1, but typically 8 or more for every dollar spent. I have 4 main points. At its core, literacy and inclusion of any kind is about access. Reading literacy equals access to books, stories, and knowledge. Digital literacy equals to access to tools, skills, confidence, and support. No convenient and usable access typically means no literacy and inclusion for members of the community, regardless of format. Digital inclusion must start with investing in local libraries and librarians. This includes training, hardware and software, learning spaces, and an established standardized curriculum so that communities can have free access to free, high quality, equitable access to digital resources and literacy. Number two, in California, we've been intentional about building access and digital inclusion at scale. Through a partnership between the California State Library and the California Library Association, we have launched or are launching something called Tech Ready California. This is a statewide effort positioning libraries as trusted hubs for digital and AI literacy, involving resources, training, technology, and programming for librarians and patrons. So typically, people ask us or other experts to present, and this is a way to standardize that. We also have a $4 million request into the governor's office and a pending budget to situate libraries as digital literacy and AI hubs to essentially build this infrastructure. And that also involves a number of the AI companies as well. We also have an IMLS-funded Reading Nation Waterfall project where we learned that access and inclusion must be systemic. That work led to the creation of a nonprofit dedicated to building book ecosystems globally. And I've included a postcard to that work where we're building book ecosystems in Kenya as well as Ukraine and with Native American communities across the country. Ecosystems thinking means not just distributing books, but creating sustainable systems and networks of access, stewardship, and use based on collaboration. So the lesson is clear: ecosystems built around local collaboration and empowerment scale access better than isolated programs. Three, at our Library Technology Integration Lab at San Jose State, we are redefining what access looks like. So we are building immersive VR and AR worlds and experiences, and we're also leveraging AI, robots, and drones to teach digital literacy to our own students and future librarians. And I also have a second postcard there just sharing some of the work we're doing there. These technologies expand how people encounter libraries. It brings library resources to communities wherever they are. And most importantly, they make access no longer just local, but distributed. And finally, number four, I see libraries as a mesh network of digital literacy and inclusion. In other words, each library connecting to one another. Each library equals a local access node, but connected together, equity at a local, state, and national and global scale can be achieved. When libraries are resource connected and empowered, equitable access is achieved at local, national, and global levels. Finally, access, literacy, and inclusion have always been the mission of libraries. The opportunity to build a global network is what's new. I believe we are beginning a renaissance period for libraries and our role to support equitable access to all types of literacy, especially digital literacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Incredible work. There are so many initiatives. And so we are going to take then our last but not least speaker, and then we're going to have a conversation about all these different examples and inspiring stories. And our speaker now is Diana Price, Central Library Manager at Alexandria Public Library.
Thank you so much, Loida, and thank you to our other speakers today. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how libraries can reduce digital exclusion in cities. So as we've heard today, the digital divide still exists. Not everyone is connected to the internet, or in households with many people, sometimes the internet connectivity is not enough for everyone to be able to use the internet as they need to. So libraries around the world provide internet access in our buildings for our patrons and citizens. We have computers people can use if they do not have one at home. We also offer Wi-Fi access, so people can bring their own devices to the library to connect that way. Many libraries also offer meeting rooms and other spaces, so entrepreneurs who may not have places to do their business can do so in the library and use our internet and other digital tools to be able to launch their businesses, have meetings, and make connections. As we've also learned today, sometimes or many times people have access to the internet, but the piece that's missing is education, whether that be how to use a computer in just a very basic way. What is a mouse? What is a monitor? There are people that are living in our communities that they do not know how to turn on a computer, how to access email. So they really need the very basics to be able to be connected, even if they have the capability to have a personal device. A lot of people have the basics, but they struggle with what they need to do on the internet, such as apply for jobs. A lot of school is online now, whether that be for children or adults continuing their education to be able to get the skills they need to have better jobs and to further themselves economically. So libraries are a really great place where we can provide help, friendly help to people. A lot of times libraries have like drop-in tech help. People don't even need to make a reservation. As we've also heard today, many people speak different languages. In Alexandria, 40% of our community speaks a language other than English at home. So we need to be able to provide services in multiple languages. Many libraries working very hard to ensure staff and volunteers are multilingual so we can provide these services in the languages that our patrons speak so we can connect with them more easily. Additionally, libraries are a great place to make connections throughout the community. In Alexandria, we have a nonprofit called Computer Corps who we work with. Computer Corps has many volunteers that speak many different languages, and we can refer people that need more complex computer help and are looking to have more formalized classes to Computer Corps. They are able to get free desktops through Computer Corps as well. So we're really happy to be able to be a connection to our patrons with that wonderful service in Alexandria. Libraries also serve people of all ages, from children through adults. And one really essential service that we provide in libraries is the ability to level the playing field for children. Many children have access to technologies at home. If parents can afford it, they can purchase many new devices, emerging technologies, classes, but there are many children that do not have this capability. Parents are struggling to pay the bills and feed their families. But libraries can provide education to children. It's supplemental to what is happening in their schools. We can provide them the opportunity to have hands-on access to new technologies such as robotics, to learn coding, to really level the playing field for these children so they are learning the same skills as their peers. And this can really help them learn about what fields are available for them to go into in their higher education, also to get those skills to be able to pursue higher education. Libraries also have the capability to do a lot of outreach in our communities. Many libraries have mobile library units, not just bookmobiles, thingmobiles. So they're able to go out into communities to connect with people that perhaps don't know what libraries provide, or especially in like maybe the climate in the United States today, are afraid to go into a building such as the library. So we can go out and meet people where they are. Libraries can go to community centers, laundromats, apartment buildings, play spaces to be able to connect people with our services that way in a place they feel more comfortable We can also hire people from those communities to be able to do this sort of outreach as trusted community members themselves. So through all of these ways, libraries are really able to help our communities and cities reduce digital exclusivity and really help bring a more level playing field to our patrons.
Now let's have a conversation about all these amazing stories. Are we our online guests are with us?
Yes.
All right. So we're going to reflect, right? We're going to share some insights and think boldly about what local digital inclusion infrastructures need from perhaps global policy agendas and how together we can ensure that no one is left behind. So important. And we have a guiding question for this conversation now. What local digital inclusion infrastructures from the global digital inclusion agenda? This is not complete from the program page, but I will restate here. Think boldly about what local digital inclusion infrastructures need from global policy agendas and how together we can ensure that no one is left behind. Perhaps there are some thoughts from our guests online. Feel free to jump in. I can't see you.
Hi. So thank you very much for that question. I think in response, I will just reiterate something that I said earlier. So currently, existing infrastructures like libraries and post offices, but I would also mention other really important ones like community centers and also even community-based organizations that often are the ones who end up helping people do things when they're unable to do things on their own digitally, are not currently being recognized in the Global Digital Compact. And I think this in many ways is actually a step back because when the WSIS action lines were first thought about in 2003, as Guillermo was mentioned earlier, all these organizations and many others were also included as key infrastructure that needed to be connected. But now we've taken a kind of a step backwards, and a lot of the focus is now just on connecting the individual with, and that kind of community connectivity aspect has been lost. So I think one important thing to do is to continue to bring people together in the way that we're doing today and really advocate for the reintroduction of all these different infrastructure and all these key anchor institutions in the connectivity agenda and the discourse, and try to get it back in somehow.
Thank you. And I am astounded about the potential of collaborating with the postal offices. It's amazing. Do we have Mr. Guillem with us? Yes.
Yes. I mean, I think Kevin covered a very important point. Let me just add one thing. I mean, one of the issues is that how we can actually listen to the voices of those communities when doing global policies from our side. As many things is easy to say and not that easy to implement. But we should put this in the very center of our agenda. So, for example, when we are discussing these kind of policies under the umbrella of the International Decade of Indigenous Languages, the indigenous communities are very assertive in saying nothing about us without us. And we need to put that in practice in several different avenues when we are discussing the connection of communities with the different services, the libraries, the post offices, and so on. But really, the challenge is to capture their actual voices and what they want with these policies. And as you can imagine, capturing those voices from New York, from Paris, from Geneva, where our headquarters are, is not always easy. So we need to further engage in this kind of partnerships, cooperations, to make sure that what we are doing in this global landscape is meaningful for those that actually matter, those in the real life outside of those our headquarters, in this case of the different UN agencies, funds, and programs. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And there is so much there to be inspired. Again, when we think why this global work is important is because it will impact countries and our work at local level. And we are working towards the same, right? Bettering our work, world, improving perhaps education, different people. So I think that's very important to keep in perspective. Damilare.
Okay, so from my own hand, I want to speak more on how we need to upskill librarians on community engagement, on advocacy, on partnership development, oftentimes through our programs that we run at Library in Africa. When we always walk them through experiential learning model. You apply what you've learned to create a capstone project or to create an activity in your library to implement. I'm always seeing them give us feedback about how they see their community interest grow from how we've trained them to implement the project and how they engage the stakeholders to see the interest they have in libraries. And over time, across all our programs, we've trained about over 200 librarians currently across African countries. We've seen them develop innovative library projects, and that shows that there's something we're not tapping into yet. Yes, libraries have the infrastructure, correct. We have the capacity, librarians are there, but are we upskilling them with the skills they need in this age and time to engage communities? I went to library school myself. I wasn't taught community engagement in library school or advocacy or public speaking in library school. I have to learn these things myself. And as we pass these skills to other younger librarians in African countries, we've seen them take charge of leadership in their various spaces. A sample I shared earlier was about in Sierra Leone. One of our fellows became deputy chief librarian of our country, a very young, a young person like myself. And that shows that if young people, young librarians are given the space, the capacity, the community, and the space to innovate, they will innovate. However, we need to now say how we also collaborate with other ecosystem partners to upskill. Currently, we launched Librarians in Tech recently, and the goal of this is to help librarians in African countries see libraries beyond just books and shelves, right? On how their roles are evolving and they need to learn tech skills in this age and time. And now that will lead us to launch a product we're building currently called Library X Africa, where we are focusing on core library tech skills librarians need in this age and time. Throughout my stay in library school, I was taught how to manage library operations and all stuff. But when I finished library school, I struggled with data technology. I had to go learn myself actually on how to use these tools. Now, in this age of AI, currently in Africa, only 2% of Africa's data are available to train AI models, only 2%. That means the continent is underrepresented, right? And libraries across African countries are sitting on a lot of knowledge and information that can be used, transformed to machine-readable formats for training for AI algorithms and all. But librarians are not in the rooms where the discussion are being made. And simply because over time, librarians think, oh, we're just going to have to stay in our shelves and our books. We have failed to engage our communities. We need to upskill librarians to see themselves as community mobilizers, to see themselves as advocates, and see themselves as champions of digital inclusion strategies in their communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Damilare, for calling our attention to something that is so real and we're in many ways still trying to figure out. But so important, these collaborations that we have mentioned today towards that goal. Diane.
That's it. Okay. I think governments really need to provide consistent funding to libraries, as well as consistent funding to give libraries the ability to have the resources they need to be able to provide technologies as well as information about technologies. In the United States, E-Rate is a program where libraries and schools are able to get a discount on high-speed internet access. And this is a very important tool that libraries need to be able to provide these services. It's disappointing that recently the part of E-Rate that extended to lending wireless hotspots was eliminated because libraries lending hotspots was a great way to be able to expand how we can reach people. They can take the internet home with them. Obviously, that gives them more time with the internet. It helps large households have better connectivity. It helps children be able to access the internet for their schoolwork, and anyone learning about new technologies that needs the internet to do so could obviously have a lot more time with the internet than they could while our buildings are open. I absolutely agree that continuing education for our library staff is extremely important. As technology is changing very rapidly, I feel like there is a fear among many members of our community who are not early adopters about all of these new technologies and how they are affecting their lives, whether positively or negatively. I think libraries and librarians are prime position to be able to educate people on these technologies. The public library in Cologne, Germany has a really interesting program for introducing their patrons to new technologies. It's a 3-step program. The first step is what is it? Basically, what is this thing? Here are the basics of what it is. Step 2 is, what are the implications around it? Are there moral implications? For example, with AI, there are wonderful things that are happening. It helps analyze data. There's lots of AI for good, but also it can take someone's job. What about the climate aspects of running AI programs? So they have an in-depth discussion. And then step 3 is the participants have a program where they can be hands-on with the technology. And I think this is a really great approach to kind of learning about something overall. And this is a great way librarians can help assuage fears, help educate our patrons on technologies, even if it's not a technology they would access in their day-to-day lives. Being confident about knowing about the technology, what it does, its implications, I think makes them better informed citizens for their country and city and states.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Diana. We have our insights.
Yes, and I would apologize. It's a little colder here than I'm used to in California, and I think I may have contracted a cold along the way. I think really the key, my research on library funding is that the majority of, at least in the United States, the majority of funding for public libraries is through the local community. And that's very important because when we talk about inclusion and equity, it really means that the government has to help break that cycle. Because if a community doesn't have the funds to support its own library, then that cycle will continue. So I think one of the roles of governments is really, and that's why MLS is so important in the United States, is it really provides that external funding to communities that otherwise would not have it. So the central role, I believe, in governments for digital inclusion and equity is again, providing funding in pockets where the communities do not have the funding to take care of themselves. And if that doesn't happen, then we have this vicious cycle of haves and have-nots, right? And we have to break that. So ultimately, governments need to break that cycle by providing those resources.
Absolutely, and it's all part of this work that we're doing towards influencing global policy agendas. And I just want to kind of like wrap up our session here before Stephen comes over and really close that how we can, through these different presentations, we can see how digital inclusion is a sort of a moving target, right? One that requires multiple access points, as we heard today, relevant and culturally responsive content, multilingualism that was mentioned, for instance, one thing, trust, human support, that Milari mentioned, upskilling of librarians and other things, and local institutions that can evolve alongside their communities. And these local institutions are, for instance, for our purposes today, libraries and postal offices, among some of them. And so, right, local digital inclusion infrastructures, that's the theme that we had today. And we are so central to this conversation on global policy that can impact our communities and our citizens, regular people like you and I, that can also contribute in their own ways to bettering our world. Any final remarks that someone has a burning idea that would like to share?
Well,
Yeah, I
I'll
think
just,
I would like to, sorry.
yeah, please go ahead.
One thing that I would like to add is because I've heard several people speak about government funding, is how there is one tool in the toolbox that I think doesn't get spoken about enough, which is the Universal Service and Access Fund. I'm not really sure what the situation is within the US with its use and whether it can be used for libraries. But one thing that I find that often is used to connect post offices and libraries in other countries is the Universal Service and Access Fund. So that's another opportunity that I think is really relevant, especially around. I mean, it's been relevant around the world. Some of the examples that I mentioned in all the case studies I covered were actually funded through a Universal Service and Access Fund. So government should make those available to more actors, and it should not just be about extending the infrastructure itself, but to providing community access. Sorry, I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. And those are some, documents and tools that libraries can also disseminate information about. Yes.
I just wanted to mention that I think it's really key to define digital inclusion locally. I think that ultimately then what that means and the value for the communities is going to vary. So I just wanted to throw that out as far as that community assessment, that working collaboratively with the local communities in terms of how digital inclusion, digital literacy can best benefit them and improve their quality of lives, I think is critical.
Absolutely. There are some areas within the UN where we are now focusing in the localization of impact and services, and that means your community, your state, or your country. And we're seeing a movement worldwide to more localization, but there is actually there is power in that in terms of impacting. And then here, what we're doing, right, global level to impact local, and that's one of the ways that we are looking at it from the American Library Association as well. And now I would like to welcome Stephen Wyver from IFLA, the Director of External Affairs of IFLA, and he is going to close up with some valuable insights.
Thank you very much. I'll join from here, and thank you everyone for for coming along. Thank you, Loida, for chairing fantastically. So there's a few things that I need to write a report about this meeting afterwards. So this is my opportunity to get my thoughts in order. But I think first of all, a key point that's been made by a few people is that we're not there yet. We are far from being in a place in a world where we have digital inclusion. That figure, even if 2.6 billion is a scary big number, it's actually a bigger, scarier number underneath, because the definition that we have of internet connectivity is blunt and dumb and doesn't actually say anything about whether everyone is able to get out of the internet what they need. It doesn't say anything about whether, it talks about a potential. It doesn't talk about, is the internet realizing its potential to deliver development, to deliver better lives, to deliver the possibility to enjoy your rights to education, your right to culture, your right to research, your right to science, your right to information, full stop. So we are in this situation. It is a problem that is not getting better. The impact of being cut off, and again, I think that came out quite strongly. If you're cut off, if you're not online, the distance from everyone else is growing as societies become more digital, as more government services go online, as more of our social, our cultural, our political, our civic lives go online. The cost of not being online is actually going up. And so it's a dynamic issue. We need to keep moving. Standing still is not even enough, because even if we stay where we are, those 2.6 billion are going to be even further away from where we need to be. I think, therefore, this underlines that value. And again, this is something that came out very strongly. We need a connectivity plus approach. We need to be looking at this challenge in different ways. We need to be looking at it in particular from the question of, is everyone getting what they need out of the internet? And I thought what you were saying, Anthony, about what digital inclusion means, it's defined at the community. In the end, it's defined at the individual level. It's not something that's easy to do. And so what we need to respond to that is an infrastructure, is a set of bodies that are focused on explicitly that, on what is it that the individual user needs from it. And this is something that libraries, that post offices are well placed to do, to listen. And Guilherme talked so sort of powerfully about all of the ways in which the imbalances, the inequities, the divisions that existed, that pre-exist the internet, they're being replicated in the online world today. They're being replicated in who has access, who's able to get the most out of the internet. It just reinforces that need to focus on looking at what the individual needs, looking at what the community needs, and listening, which I thought that was another really important word to bring to the table. And that's something, again, that librarians, post offices, people who are embedded in their communities are able to do. And that, as Kevin said, it's not something that can happen from New York, or it can happen in New York's public libraries. It can't happen from First Avenue at the UN necessarily per se. So in terms of the solutions, I think Kevin said it so strongly. We need to move away from solutions that are purely tech-based. An app, a satellite, or whatever is not going to actually solve all the issues. We need to accept that it's a little bit more complicated than that. Step away from sort of easily focusing on, well, we've got 100,000 more people online, and so, or 100 million people online. That's great, but is that 100 million people whose lives are actually changing? And to do that, we can't necessarily rely on those numbers. We need to actually recognize the value of these infrastructures that are there for the long haul, that aren't just going to disappear, aren't going to tick a box and disappear. We need to see this as a constant, as a dynamic, as a living task. And we need to make sure that we're investing, we're supporting, we're recognizing the infrastructures that do that. And I think that point at the end about the role of universal service and access funds, I don't know, we're seeing that with the case of E-rate, which is, of course, a good example of a universal service and access fund at work in the US context. Sadly, we're seeing it in the breach and the need to defend it. But there's so many good examples from the States that can be brought to show why that matters so much. But that importance of investing, and it is an investment, it's not a cost, it's something that more than pays off, as Anthony was saying earlier on. But making sure we're putting that money into there, supporting librarians, making sure that librarians within our own field, that we see our roles as being dynamic. And Damilare, it was so powerful to say that, I don't know, it is about the sort of pure technical skills, but it's also about the human skills, the imagination to use it, to step up, to get involved in the conversations as well. So, and I'm sure these are exactly the case. I'm sure that with Postmasters, Kevin, you'll have the same sort of challenge, that it's about skills, but it's also about making sure that when there's an opportunity to shape the debate, to be part of the debate, their Postmasters are standing up, they're getting involved. And I think through that, and the final point, which I really appreciate, and I think that's something that it's almost the next frontier for us, it's that systems working. It's seeing ourselves not just as part of a local ecosystem, but also of a regional and national ecosystem, and thinking about how we can bring together all those really strong examples, but then work at that state level in California, get involved at the National Library of Sierra Leone, as Damilare was saying, and actually really step up, realize that potential, be recognized, be seen for, be supported as that really vital part of a digital inclusion ecosystem. So with that, I will close on my side. Thank you, everyone, for coming along. It's been a real pleasure having you here today. Thank you to Guilherme for joining in the evening, to Kevin for joining in the evening. You can see that the computer is still set to European time, so you can see exactly what time it is for them. So thank you for joining online. Thank you to Diana, to Damilare, to Anthony, to Loida for the chairing. And thank you, of course, to UNESCO IFAP for the support, to ALA SDG Task Force for the support. Thank you very much.